Test takers in South Korea wrapped up the annual college entrance exam known as the Suneung on Thursday, a day backed by support from the entire nation. Top diplomats from South Korea and the U.S. met on the sidelines of the Group of 7 foreign ministers meeting in Canada, where U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said he would help ensure the joint fact sheet on the two countries' trade and security agreements was released at an early date. The longest shutdown of the U.S. federal government in history came to an end on Wednesday local time, after President Donald Trump signed a funding bill to get the country working again. Suneung Day 2025 here in South Korea, where mostly high school seniors take the country's annual college entrance exam, has ended. A marathon of more than 9 hours of exams will determine their next steps in life. But before anything, these test takers are ready to enjoy a bit of freedom. Our An Sung-jin starts us off.
The long journey has come to an end. As students began to pour out after the 9-hour marathon national college entrance exam, also known as the Suneung, some had expressions of excitement on their faces, while some looked worried as friends and families greeted them.
It was a bit more difficult than what I practiced with, so I was a bit startled, but at least I'm done with it. I want to travel abroad or use the test paper discounts to have fun.
I want to allow myself to have a lot of rest.
I think I did fine in the morning, but I'm not sure about the afternoon. I just want to go home and sleep, though I still have an interview to prepare for.
For many students here in South Korea, having a good score in the Suneung is something to strive for, as it could decide their next steps in life. This year, more than 550,000 students took the test at nearly 1,300 test centers across the nation. The number of test takers for this year was the highest in 7 years, though the number of those retaking the exam was slightly decreased, partly due to the reversal of plans to expand the medical school quota. To properly assess test takers' knowledge in line with the public education curriculum, the exam committee ensured a balanced distribution of questions with appropriate difficulty.
We excluded questions that would favor those trained in private education and focused on core and fundamental elements of the public school education.
A team of on-site teachers evaluated that this year's exam would have likely been perceived as slightly more challenging compared to last year's, as questions designed to differentiate top-performing students were somewhat more difficult. As the sun set on this year's Suneung Day, the students of 2025 have truly earned their rest after a series of subjects, starting off with Korean language, continuing through with math, English, and elective subjects. For many, the day marked not just the end of an exam, but the beginning of a new chapter, a well-earned rest after years of effort. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
And Suneung Day wasn't just a big day for test takers. From police, taxi drivers to parents, the entire nation rolled up its sleeves to cheer for the country's next generation. Our Kim Do-yeon has the story.
A police car arrives in a hurry. Opening the back door, coming out is not a detained suspect. Rather, it's a test taker for this year's Suneung, or the national once-a-year college entrance exam. This is one of 234 examples of police support or escorts that happen on Thursday morning to make sure examinees are not late to take the test, as they have to report by 8:10. Even this accident on a highway early in the morning couldn't stop the police from escorting. The truck blocked the lanes in one direction completely, and a test taker called for help. Police located them and weaved through the traffic, and later said that the caller arrived early to the designated test center about 50 kilometers away. Not only the police, but taxis have helped out with the escorts as well.
I'm supporting them like they're my grandchildren.
At the test centers are juniors cheering for their seniors to perform their best. And just as much as the test takers themselves, parents feel the pressure and nervousness. Hugs are seen at the entrance as the kids take one of their first steps into adulthood.
I'm really nervous as well, but my son will feel more pressure. I hope he doesn't get nervous, since he prepared well.
With this exam once a year and the societal pressure, prayers and tears are also seen as the kids enter the 8-hour test marathon with 12 years of education leading up to this day. And with this, the whole nation's support reflects its sincere support for the test takers who are the nation's next generation. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
In other news, the top diplomats of the 7 wealthiest democracies held a foreign ministers meeting in Canada on Wednesday. And now, on the sidelines of the meeting, South Korean and U.S. diplomats met, reportedly having discussed the need to promptly release the joint fact sheet. Our Kim Bo-kyung tells us more.
Amid the delayed announcement of a joint fact sheet outlining the outcome of the recent summit between President Lee Jae-myung and his U.S. counterpart Donald Trump, the two countries' top diplomats had a brief meetup on Wednesday local time on the sidelines of the Group of 7 foreign ministers meeting in Canada. According to the Foreign Ministry on Thursday, Foreign Minister Cho Hyun has asked U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio to help speed up the release of the joint fact sheet so that the matters agreed upon during the summit can be concretely implemented. Secretary Rubio reportedly said he would actively communicate with the relevant government agencies to help ensure that the fact sheet can be released as soon as possible. The two governments are reportedly at odds over where South Korea would build nuclear-powered submarines, with Seoul maintaining its stance that it should be done in-country, while U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick and others reportedly argue that it should take place in the U.S., viewing it as an extension of the Korea-U.S. shipbuilding cooperation. Meanwhile, the top diplomats of G7 countries reaffirmed their commitment to the complete denuclearization of North Korea. In a joint statement, they condemned Pyongyang's nuclear and ballistic missile programs, reaffirmed commitment to the regime's complete denuclearization, and expressed grave concerns over the North's cryptocurrency thefts, and urged it to resolve the abductions issue expeditiously. When it comes to the Ukraine war, that statement reaffirmed unwavering support for Ukraine. The top diplomats condemned North Korea and Iran for providing Russia with military assistance and China for providing weapons and dual-use components. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
South Korea may be heading into one of its most sweeping policy overhauls in years. President Lee Jae-myung told his aides today that structural reforms are essential to reviving the country's sluggish economy. Our presidential office correspondent Song Yujin has the details.
President Lee Jae-myung has signaled that bold structural reforms are on the way next year.
경제 회복의 불씨가 켜진 지금이 바로 구조개혁의 적기라고 판단이 됩니다. 정부는 내년이 본격적 구조개혁을 통한 대한민국 국가 대전환의 출발점이 될 수 있도록 관련된 준비를 철저하고 속도감 있게 준비해야 되겠습니다.
At a weekly meeting with his top aides on Thursday, President Lee said such reforms are essential to address what he described as South Korea's biggest challenge, the steady decline in its potential growth rate.
정권마다 1%씩 잠재 성장률이 떨어져가지고 곧 마이너스로 좀 갈 수도 있는 그런 상황입니다. 혈관에 찌꺼기가 쌓이면 좋은 영양분을 섭취해도 건강이 좋아지지 않는 것처럼 이 사회 전반의 문제를 방치하면 어떤 정책도 제 효과를 낼 수 없기 때문입니다.
To restore long-term growth, Lee has outlined 6 areas for overhaul: regulation, finance, the public sector, pensions, education, and labor, priorities shaped by the administration's first 5 months in office. According to presidential spokesperson Kim Nam-jun, detailed plans for each of these reforms will be announced later, as Thursday's meeting focused on reviewing the current situation and setting the overall direction. Lee placed particular emphasis on the labor sector, stressing that fatal workplace accidents, many of them preventable, must come to an end.
기업들도 이 안전이라고 하는 문제를 줄여야 될 비용이라는 측면에서 접근할 게 아니고 당연히 늘려가야 될 투자다라는 인식을 갖춰야 할 겁니다. 관계 부처들이 겨울철 위험 사업장에 대한 안전 점검도 서두르도록 조치해 주시기 바랍니다.
The president's comments come after the collapse of a boiler tower in the city of Ulsan last week, which left at least 6 workers dead and 1 still missing, and has reignited concerns over workplace safety here in the country. Song Yujin, Arirang News.
Amidst a moderately growing yet complex global economy, South Korea's expected recovery faces widely divergent forecasts, primarily influenced by the looming impact of U.S. tariffs. For more on this, we have our economics correspondent Moon Jiyoung here in the studio. Hello, Jiyoung.
Good evening, Dami.
So, Jiyoung, let's start with the 2026 outlook for the global economic picture. What are the main projections and potential risks?
Well, the 2026 global economic picture, as framed by the Korea Institute for International Economic Policy, is one of a buffered slowdown amid an asymmetric world. This implies a global economy with no clear common direction, exhibiting differing trends across regions, even as nations partially mitigate economic shocks. The state-run institute projects the global economy to grow by 3% in 2026, matching this year's pace. This represents a 0.1 percentage point upward revision from the institute's previous forecast made in May. A major downside risk is the rapid shift in the new tariff and trade order. The impact of U.S. tariffs slows global trade volume growth, weakening the multilateral trading system.
As countries with a high dependency on trade will find it difficult to avoid pressure from reduced exports due to worsening external conditions, this uncertainty in the trade sector is one of the most significant downside risks.
Additional risks include weakened physical capacity and disruptions from imbalanced AI investment. Regionally, growth rates vary. As tariffs dampen consumer sentiment, the U.S. economy is forecast to grow by 1.6%. The Eurozone is projected to grow by 1.1% and Japan by 0.6%. Among emerging markets, China's growth is expected to moderate to 4.2%, slowed by the 2025 base effect and ongoing trade conflicts. Amidst moderate forecasts and risks, Kiev emphasizes critical international cooperation for navigating the asymmetric era, despite limited policy options.
So there's that for the global outlook. Now let's look domestically. What's the outlook for the Korean economy next year, especially with its, changing growth, key growth drivers?
While the South Korean economy is expected to expand modestly at 1.8% next year, driven by domestic demand as U.S. tariffs take their toll on exports. This is according to the Korea Development Institute, which anticipates a significant shift in growth drivers from exports to domestic demand.
The growth of exports may gradually decelerate as the impact of tariff hikes progressively spreads. However, with consumption improving due to falling market interest rates and expansionary fiscal policies, accumulated construction orders are expected to partially translate into construction investment with a time lag. Consequently, despite the slowdown in export growth, the economy is anticipated to see a moderate improvement, primarily driven by domestic demand.
The state-run institute anticipates private consumption to rise by 1.6%, buoyed by falling market interest rates and expansionary fiscal policy. Construction investment is projected to rebound to 2.2% growth after a severe 9.1% contraction this year. Despite this anticipated shift, KDI flags high trade uncertainty and a persistently high exchange rate as primary risks, potentially fueling inflation.
Now, Jiyoung, many other institutions at home and abroad offer quite varying predictions for 2026. What would really explain this?
Well, indeed, the Korean economy is expected to see a moderate recovery next year, but Trump's tariffs mean differing growth forecasts between different institutions. While there's a general expectation for recovery, potentially doubling this year's average growth rate, predictions still vary substantially. Major domestic and international institutions project Korea's economic growth rate for 2026 to be between 1.6% and 2.2%. At the more optimistic end, the OECD and major global investment banks project 2.2% growth. Their positive outlook is largely attributed to recent better-than-expected export performance. In the mid-range, both the KDI and the IMF present their respective forecasts. On the more conservative side, the Asian Development Bank and the Bank of Korea forecast 1.6% growth. This creates a 0.6 percentage point gap between the highest and lowest projections. The primary reason for this significant difference lies in how each institution evaluates the potential impact of U.S. tariffs.
Right now, especially because of the Trump administration, a lot of things are very unsure. So a lot of people are making some assumptions about what will happen next year, which may or may not become true. And that's making a wide dispersion of growth estimates for next year, more than what we usually see.
However, a common consensus emerges amidst these varied forecasts and uncertainties. The recovery of domestic demand, suggesting internal economic engines will gradually pick up despite external volatility.
Hopefully. All right, Young, thanks for coming in tonight.
Thank you for having me, Dami.
We now turn to the National Assembly, where lawmakers here in South Korea cleared a busy agenda, passing numerous bills while preparing for high-profile votes and important legislation later this month. Our Moon Hae-ryun tells us more.
Lawmakers in South Korea wrapped up a packed parliamentary session on Thursday, moving swiftly through a slate of non-controversial bills while also reporting a high-profile arrest motion. More than 50 livelihood-related bills were passed in roughly 2 hours, following an agreement reached between the ruling Democratic Party and the main opposition People Power Party before the session. Among the bills were education-related measures, including stronger penalties for university admissions officers who fail to step aside when conflicts of interest arise, amendments to the Last Mile Logistics Industry Development Act, which strengthens protection for delivery workers, and changes to the Motor Vehicle Management Act aimed at preventing electric vehicle fires. The motion to arrest People Power Party lawmaker Chu Kyung-ho was also reported during today's session. He has been accused of obstructing last December's parliamentary vote to lift the emergency martial law order, and in response, Chu is calling the investigation politically motivated. The next plenary session is scheduled for the 27th, where lawmakers will vote on the arrest motion for former PPP floor leader Chu Kyung-ho and finalize negotiations on fast-track bills still pending agreement. These fast-track bills include a new act aimed at strengthening the competitiveness of South Korea's semiconductor industry, which establishes a related committee under the president, as well as amendments to an act guaranteeing the right of franchises to collective bargaining. Fast-track designation allows urgent bills to skip normal committee reviews and go straight to a plenary session for a vote. Thursday's plenary session also included appointments to the Nuclear Safety and Security Commission, recommended by the People Power Party and the Speaker of the National Assembly. Other appointments requiring parliamentary approval, such as those to the Anti-Corruption and Civil Rights Commission, National Education Commission, and Human Rights Commission, will be addressed at the session later this month. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
America will resume all federal services after a record shutdown of 43 days, as the lawmakers narrowly voted to pass a short-term government funding bill. President Donald Trump sealed the deal on Wednesday night. Our Oh Seung has the details.
Ending the longest shutdown of federal services in U.S. history, President Donald Trump on Wednesday local time signed a short-term funding bill to reopen the government.
And it's an honor now to sign this incredible bill and get our country working again. Thank you.
This came after the House of Representatives voted 222 to 209 to pass a compromise bill advanced by the Senate on Monday to extend government funding through January 30th. The bill brings back hundreds of thousands of federal workers, resuming major public services from issuing food stamps to managing national parks and air traffic control. However, the package remains a short-term fix, not a resolution, with most Democrats remaining opposed to the bill. At the heart of the deadlock that led to the record 43-day shutdown, the biggest point of contention had been the Republicans' exclusion of healthcare subsidies, which millions of Americans rely on. One Democrat said the fight is not over.
We will continue to fight to lower the high cost of living. House Democrats will continue to fight to address the health care crisis that Republicans have created. And House Democrats will continue to fight to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits for tens of millions of Americans. This fight is not over. We're just getting started.
While Senate Majority Leader John Thune promised to hold a vote in his chamber on an extension by December 12th, the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, has made no such assurances, rather blaming Democrats for the government shutdown's fallout.
Absolutely no question in anybody's mind now that the Democrats were responsible for this. They openly admitted, many of them said it in their own words, that they used the American people as leverage in this political game.
With the political standoff expected to stretch on, Congress faces yet another funding deadline for January 30th. Observers say if negotiations stall again, the risk of another shutdown early next year remains very real. Suneung, Arirang News.
The world's fossil fuel emissions will hit a new record in 2025, according to the largest global carbon balance report. Researchers at the Global Carbon Project have predicted the nations will emit roughly 38.1 billion tons of planet-warming carbon dioxide this year for burning oil, gas, and coal for energy. Emissions appear to stay nearly flat in China due to its transition to renewable energy, while rising significantly in the U.S. and the European Union. The data presented in the report confirmed that it is unrealistic to limit global warming to less than 1.5 degrees Celsius. NewJeans may be on the verge of returning, with ADOR already finalizing discussions with members Hain and Hedin ahead of tonight's legal deadline. The agency is now preparing separate talks with the remaining 3 members, raising expectations of controversy for a complete comeback. Suneung has more.
After a year-long contract dispute, the likelihood grows of NewJeans returning as a full 5-member group. A key deadline comes at midnight on Thursday. If the members do not file an appeal by the 14th at 12 a.m., the court's first trial ruling confirming their exclusive contracts with ADOR are valid will automatically be finalized. All 5 members have expressed intent to return. ADOR has already completed prior consultations with Hain and Hedin, who decided to respect the court's ruling and follow through with their contracts. The agency is now arranging separate meetings with Minji, Hani, and Danielle, who announced their return just hours after ADOR confirmed the first 2 members' comeback. The 3 members released their statement independently, while ADOR noted that it is confirming their intentions, signaling a different tone compared to the earlier pair. Former ADOR CEO Min Hee-jin also addressed the developments. In a statement released on Thursday, Min said she respects and supports the members' decision to return, adding that she values the courage of the members who joined hands once again to protect each other. Once the appeal deadline passes, the agency is expected to sit down with all 3 to align on the next steps. Discussions are likely to mirror the earlier case, centering on upholding the court's decision and rebuilding a working relationship inside a company now operating without former CEO Min Hee-jin. With the legal process nearing its conclusion, ADOR now faces the task of rebuilding communication within the team and establishing a stable framework for NewJeans' full group activities. Suneung, Arirang News.
For the National College Entrance Exam, the whole country continued to be generally clear without any cool spells. Even though the morning started chilly, the temperature warmed up quickly in the afternoon. It exceeded the previous year's temperature by 3 to 5 degrees, reaching 17 degrees in Seoul and 18 degrees in Daegu and Daejeon. With mild conditions, dusty air come up as a problem again. The concentration of ultra-fine dust will rise to bad levels even during the night and will be bad tomorrow morning around some eastern and southern parts of the country. Most areas will start off in the single digits tomorrow morning, with Seoul at 3 degrees, Gyeongju at 4 degrees. Daily highs will rise up to 13 degrees in Seoul and Chuncheon, 16 degrees in Daegu. After rain stops on Sunday, the temperatures will plummet sharply and freezing cold weather will come around. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is all we have for tonight. I'm Kim Dami. From all of us here at Arirang, thanks for watching and good night.